Hi, I'm Frank Washcook, news editor of PR Week, and I'm here with Dan Bartlett, the president and CEO of H&K Strategies in the U.S. and the former communications director to President George W. Bush. Dan, welcome.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
So when you look at the Republican primaries going on now, what are the main differences in the way that the people running for the presidency communicate with voters now and the way they did when you were running campaigns 10 years ago?
Well, it's interesting. In the presidential campaign in 2000, there weren't iPhones, there weren't Twitter accounts, there weren't the social media boom that we've seen really took place while we were in the White House, in the latter years of the White House. And what you're seeing is the ability to target specific voters. You see, when you're trying to develop a strategy to win either the nomination or the general election, trying to get 51% of the vote. And you have to stack up thin constituencies that get you to that number. And so in the Republican Party, you're going to have fiscal conservatives, you're going to have social conservatives, you're going to have, I guess, Tea Partiers now. And the question is, how can you most effectively target those constituencies with messages that will resonate and invigorate them to go vote for you? And with technology now and the ability to micro-target, so to speak, in a very efficient way. You could do it in the past, but it was more expensive and costly. Now, with what technology can do, you can reach your voters through, without having to go through the traditional filters of media or whether it be, like I said, through more expensive ways or through paid advertising. It really, in some respects, even though money still dominates, it really has leveled the playing field when it comes to targeting voters and reaching those voters.
So how does that change getting the main message overall out there? I think if you think about the '08 Obama campaign, you think of hope and change and these one-word, very straight-to-the-point messages. Does it mean that you have to take the message and boil it down to a few words now when you're trying to reach specific voters through all these new technologies? Because with all of these new technologies, it seems to make it a lot more complicated process than it was in the past.
Well, it's interesting. There's two things, and good campaigns can rationalize these two competing interests. Because there's so much access to information now, and the fact that voters or otherwise can go to so many different sources, and they're being bombarded with so many different messages, it requires an enormous amount of discipline, message discipline, to really boil down to whether it's hope or change or what it may be, a simple and yet powerful message that will resonate across all your constituencies. There's got to be, you can never lose sight of the fact that you've got to have a broad architecture for your candidacy. Now, you got to rationalize that with the fact that, as I talked about just a second ago, is that you're able to communicate with each of these constituencies. The problem is everybody's hearing everything now. And so you got to make sure that messages you're pushing to maybe social conservatives is not going to turn off other constituencies. And a classic example of that, during the '08 campaign, and Barack Obama's team ran a really smart campaign, particularly with social media, but even they got tripped up, if you recall. Barack Obama was at a fundraiser in San Francisco talking to one of his constituencies, right, in which he made a reference to voters in Pennsylvania clinging to their religion and their guns. Somebody had an iPhone up, caught it, put it up on YouTube. The Hillary Clinton campaign ran hard with that, and they won Pennsylvania with 19 points. There's a whole different constituency that heard that, and so it does require campaigns to be smart. It requires campaigns to understand that in this crowded marketplace and an information age that you have to have the left hand knowing what the right hand's doing with these constituencies. So, but the bottom line is, in this environment, more discipline is needed to really, and this is, I think, the struggle that Mitt Romney's having, is that I think he has great white papers on the specific issues. When it's a well thought out position, he can articulate it, but what is the what's that broad architecture that is kind of saying why I should be president? And I think he's struggling to find that.
And so that leads into my next question. If you have a moment on the stump where whatever you're trying to say doesn't come out the right way, or whatever the case is, or or if the candidate just messes up at a live event and says something completely off message.
That never happened to George Bush.
So with all of the social media out there right now, how do you respond to that? And how has that changed in recent years?
What I found is, look, when a mistake is made, own up to it as quickly as possible. It's natural to kind of defend and protect and say, that's not what he meant to say, or trying to clarify or try to spin it for that matter. And, look, authenticity reigns. Right. And be smart about it. I thought it was smart about Mitt Romney the other day when he said, look, we've made mistakes. You know, don't blame this on my staff. I've made mistakes. You know, I wish candidates had the courage to do that more often and do it quicker. And I think the quicker you do that, the quicker the media and others will let you move on. And so, you know, the old adage, when you're in a hole, stop digging. Right. It's amazing that more candidates don't learn that simple lesson.
And so how does the messaging environment, especially with the technology out there today, change when you go from being a presidential candidate to being president? I mean, it would seem to change the dynamic entirely. Well, from your experience, how does it change?
Absolutely, and that's something I think even this White House has had a challenge with in the early days and months is presidential campaigns, as complicated as they are, as unwieldy as they can be, there's still a sense of you've got a core team, campaign team, you've got the candidate, and you've got the ability to control what is said and done on any given basis. When you become president, that all changes. Those who you represent, the entire federal government, the management of Congress, the management of other world leaders, other organizations, the ability for others to intrude upon what felt like and was during a campaign a very disciplined operation becomes very unwieldy. Right. And so it was a maddening experience that all good plans go to waste. So we would have meetings after meetings, and we're going to roll out these initiatives next week and all this, and then you wake up that day and somebody else is dictating what you're going to be talking about. And so and I really do believe that probably one thing that if I were advising a new president is that they always bring their political advisors in. Right. And the political advisors then become the people who are in charge of the West Wing of the White House. And they do that because there's the trust factor more than anything else. But I think it would be wise for any president to have equal balance with people who know how to communicate or run government and make sure that those people have an equal seat at the table. Because usually it's a disproportionate seat at the table. The political people have a greater say. And there's been a lot of reporting about that with this White House, and most White Houses are not immune from that. But just because you're good in politics doesn't mean necessarily it's an obvious transfer to being good in governance. And I think most White Houses get that, but it's usually after 1 or 2 rough years. Right. And so my advice would be balance out that team right out of the gate.
Right. Again, this is Frank Washcook. I'm the news editor at PR Week, and I'm here with Dan Bartlett. He is the president and CEO of H&K Strategies in the U.S. and the former communications director for President George W. Bush. Thank you.